this is how I got involved in the whole Governor Perry thing, even though my mother lives in Plano. In 2011, I had coffee with a GOP party chairman, my state chairman. And, by this time I was traumatized. I just could not have another Obama. I just could not do another 4 years. It was miserable. So I said to my party chairman, who's going to be the candidate in 2012? It was July of 2011. This man said to me, Rick Perry. I said, he's not running, good luck to you, because he's not in the race. He said, he's going to get in the race. And in fact, so I go home, I do all this research on Governor Perry, and everything is number one in the country, number one for jobs, number one for business. Award after award after award, from even awards people don't know, that he gets the Criminal Justice Reform Award, to 2009, the Defender of Jerusalem Award from Israel. I mean, who gets that when you're a governor? Seriously. Who gets that? Not only that, but he sticks his nose in the Gaza flotilla issue in 2011, and he goes and busts on Eric Holder and Obama for breaking the law with the Gaza flotilla. Who does that when their state governor gets involved in Israel's issues? He made Israel, Texas is the fourth largest trading partner with Israel in the entire world, not the country, the world. He was against doing business with companies that were supporting Iran long before we knew that these were problems, and we had a president that was selling out Israel. So those were issues for me. Things like recently, I'm sure you've seen in the news, the Marcus Luttrell story, where Governor and First Lady Perry took in the lone survivor, Marcus Luttrell, who'd come back from being completely traumatized in Afghanistan, being the only person that survived an ambush, came back, shows up on the governor's doorstep in 2007, completely broken in spirit, in body, wife leaves him, drug problem, shows up on their doorstep, and what do? They take him in. They give him a bedroom, and a bed, and a television, and First Lady Perry takes him to therapy for his body, for his mind. And did they do an Obama, like call the press and go, look what we did, look what we did? No, nobody even knows about it. I tell people this story and they're like, are you serious? You really did that? So to me, my constant admiration and support for the governor is, obviously we need somebody who's going to put people, the 93 million people not working, thank you, Obama, back to work. We need jobs brought back to our country. We need small business. We need entrepreneurs. But the morals, the character, the values, the love of our veterans, the support of our military. He's an Air Force captain. I can go on and on. I could do this for 2 hours, and I'm not going to get the time. My honor to introduce the longest-serving governor of Texas, Governor Rick Perry.
Thank you, Bettina. Thank you. Good afternoon, Florida, the Panhandle. I came here for the first time the summer of 1971 as a young cadet at Texas A&M. Somebody how many electrical engineers in the room? Can you come up and work on this just a second? Cut that off. There you go. I can unplug it. I know that'll work. There it is. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Give him a hand there. The electrical engineers in the room. Anyway, I came here in 1971 as a young cadet from Texas A&M on my way to summer camp, General. And we were here for the boys from BMI, BPI, the Citadel, Norwich Academy, and the Blood Texas A&M. And we came here. This was the major ROTC programs in the country came and did their summer camps together. And we all did it that way because we already knew how to march and make beds. So we had that pretty much covered. And came over here, and I got exposed to a part of the United States that I had never seen before, I did not know existed. One of the most beautiful places I had ever been in my life. That, from Fort Walton Beach down to Destin, if there's a prettier place in America, I don't know where it is. You all are blessed to live in this beautiful place. So anyway, it was a great and extraordinary summer, and General, it was when I learned a great lesson. We went over to the Ranger School. They took us young Air Force cadets through the Ranger program, and this was a very abbreviated program. But at the end of it, our Air Force captain stood up, and we stayed out in the brush and in the bush and in the water, and we were waterlogged. And you know, the last 48 hours, we were awake doing our dead reckoning program, and it was over with. And the captain said, "If you boys didn't learn anything, you learned that you didn't want to be in the Army." So, hey, speaking of, how many veterans are in the crowd here? I know there's going to be 12 lot of veterans in this audience. And thank you for your service. My father instilled in me this extraordinary love of this country and of public service. My dad was a 19-year-old tail gunner on B-17s in the fall of 1944, flying out of East Anglia. He flew 35 missions over Nazi-held Germany. As a matter of fact, I called him this last Christmas. I said, "Dad, where were you 70 years ago today?" He said, "I was flying over the Battle of the Bulge, son." And I want to say, Samuel, stand up just a second. Let me say, Sam was there. Sam was at the Battle of the Bulge in 1944, and my dad would want to tell you thank you for your service, as I do want to say thank you for your service. We have an opportunity in this country every day to say thank you to men and women who have sacrificed for this country. Men and women who, when this country asked them to serve, they held their hand up and said, "Here am I, send me." And one of the reasons I'm really still engaged with public service is because of individuals like Sam, like so many of you in here, and not just the men and women who serve, but their families. Because this is truly, this isn't about just those that have served. It's also about the families that are impacted. We've been at war for a decade plus in this country. There are thousands of young men and women who are being ill-served, I will suggest to you, by our Veterans Administration. And one of the things that we as Americans have to stand up and say is enough. And we're going to deliver the services to these men and women. And the next President of the United States has to address this. And it's one of the things that drives me as an American, as a citizen, as a patriot, that we've got to take care of these young men and women. They honorably serve, they sacrificially serve. And it's up to us as citizens to proclaim across this country that we will deliver to them the services, the promise that we made to them. And it really goes back to, the core of who we are as a people. You know, there's a little pessimism going on in the country today, and I tell people, I said, you know, I kind of understand that. I understand why there's a bit of pessimism out there. You see 1 out of 10 of our citizens, they're either unemployed, underemployed, or just completely given up any hope of finding a job. 1 out of 5 children in this country live in a family that's on food stamps. And I understand economically, I mean, the president talks about the economy and the recovery. As a matter of fact, during his State of the Union address, he was talking about this great recovery that had occurred. And I'm thinking, well, he's been paying attention. He knows that since he became president, that 1.5 million jobs were created in my home state. And while the rest of the country lost 400,000 jobs. Texas created 1.5 million jobs from the end of 2007 through the end of 2014. And the president is about to publicly say, and I want to give a shout out to Texas for this economy and the recovery that we've had in this country. Maybe not. But that's the fact. I tell people, I said, listen, I know this country can get back on track economically. Because for the last 14 years, I've had the extraordinary privilege to govern a state that has made an extraordinary impact on America, on the citizens that live in that state. There are people that call this the Texas miracle. And I tell folks, I said, actually, it's not a miracle. A miracle I can't explain. This I can explain. We put policies into place, and they're really pretty simplistic. It's not rocket science. You have tax policy that doesn't take more than needed to run the government, leave more of it in the hands of the entrepreneur. You have a regulatory climate that is fair and predictable, a legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing. Doug, we talked about how the expansion and explosion of the access to health care occurred in Texas over that decade. And it's because we passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation. We stopped the frivolous lawsuits that were driving the subspecialists and the other physicians and the healthcare providers away from healthcare. And today in Texas, there are 35,000 more doctors licensed to practice medicine in Texas than there were a decade ago, because we put those tort reforms into place. And the fourth item that you put in policy-wise are accountable public schools, which basically translate to a skilled workforce. eBay, Facebook, all of those companies that have relocated and grown in the state of Texas. I can promise you, when Toyota was making the decision last year about relocating their North American headquarters out of California to Plano, Texas, they did their homework. And there was no question whether or not the skilled workforce was going to be there for them. All of these companies that have relocated and moved around. And you know who pays a lot of attention to all of that and has paid a lot of attention to that over the last 4.5 years? Your governor. Rick Scott gets it about economic development. There is not a greater competitor in this country to states like Texas, Louisiana, or South Carolina than Florida. And Rick will be more than happy to tell you that, he's watched Texas for these last years, and he said, it works. And that's the beauty of our system that our founding fathers put into place. Louis Brandeis was he was actually a very liberal Supreme Court justice. And he said, the states are the laboratories of democracy. And the states, our founding fathers meant for the states to experiment, to try different ideas. And he said, now from time to time, a state's going to make a bad decision and their citizens are going to be not as well served by that. But he said, at least they haven't destroyed the republic. And our founding fathers understood that if you consolidate all that power in Washington, D.C., if you let Washington come up with the ways to deliver health care and say this is the way that health care is going to be delivered now to all the 50 states, for the life of me, why would you want a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. to decide what your children's educational curriculum is going to be in your schools in Florida? No way. There's no way that you can do that. Nobody is smart enough. We're too diverse a country. Whether it's on health care, or whether it's on education policy, whether it's transportation infrastructure. The idea that one size is going to fit all, that Washington's going to come up with that way to do all of these different things. Our founding fathers were brilliant. When they developed that Constitution, and it took them a long time to sort through all of that. But they understood that the federal government is supposed to do a few things, and do those few things really well, like stand a strong military, like securing the border of this. Wouldn't it be great if the federal government actually did those two things and did those two things really well? I know a little bit about both of those. Having had the great privilege to serve as a pilot in the United States Air Force from 1972 to 1977. I saw what happened to this country in the late 70s. I saw our military starting to be hollowed out. I saw a president who didn't believe that America's strength and the projection of our strength was that important. I saw an economic... I'm thinking that right now is a reflection of America in the late 1970s. Think about where we find ourselves today. We've got an economy that's on its back and everybody knows it. Well, I think the president even knows it. He just won't admit it. We've got the lowest participation rate in the job sector since 1978. Lowest participation rate since 1978. 78, we had these incredible bad interest rates. Jobs and the economy are on its back. We saw our Olympic athletes boycotted from going to the Olympics. Kids who had spent their entire lives just to go represent America. And this president decided he wanted to send a message. I had been out of the Air Force for about 18 months. I was a wheat farmer out in West Texas. And our wheat got embargoed. Wheat became used as a weapon. We were on our backs in this country. We were suffering. We saw Iran and what happened in Iran, General. And our military really hollowed out. We were pessimistic. But the great news is, in a short 10-year period of time, we saw the Berlin Wall fall, and we saw Soviet communism defeated because there was a president of the United States that understood that when America is strong, the world is safer. That understood that you can build your military back up by building your economy back up. And that's the story that we've got for this country. As sure as the sun's going to come up in the east tomorrow, I'll guarantee you, I'm so optimistic about the future of this country because the best days of America are in front of us. Because the American people, with the right we're only a couple of good economic decisions and a leadership change at the top away from the best days this country's ever seen. We are, and I will suggest to you, on the economic side, it is inextricably intertwined to our energy policy. You realize that North American energy, talking about our good neighbor, our number one trading partner, the Canadians, the United States, and Mexico, have more known energy reserves than the entirety of the Soviet Union and, well, the old Soviet Union, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. That's how much energy we have in this region. And the idea that we've got a president that vetoed the XL pipeline for the poorest of reasons, I will suggest to you, to use that energy to create a secure America, not to mention the jobs that get created, to build that pipeline, then the ensuing economic impact, it can be staggering. And let me share with you what I mean by that. Because I've seen this occur in the 13th largest economy in the world. I'm talking about my home state. Energy policy. When you have abundant sources of energy, you can drive down the cost of electricity. We had a 40% decrease in energy costs in Texas from 2002 through about 2010. I mean, you have that abundant energy supply like we've got in North America, and you can drive down the cost of electricity. You couple that with good corporate tax policy. When I talk about that, driving down the corporate tax rate. We've got the highest corporate tax rate in the Western world. drive it down. Not only will it send the message to those that have gone offshore to come back, we'll lift up mid-level wages. Any accountant worth their salt will tell you that you have a 10% reduction in the corporate tax rate, you'll have a 5 to 10% increase in mid-level wages. Every blue-collar worker in this country ought to be looking at the Republicans and say, I'm going to vote for you because you're going to lower the corporate tax rate and you're going to raise the wages. That's our story. We got a great story to tell out there. We can bring this country's economy back in such a powerful way. A renaissance of manufacturing. Like this country has never seen, like the world has never seen. That's why I'm optimistic about the future of this country. I know that I've seen it happen before. Think about how resilient we are. Think about where we've come from as a country. We lived through a civil war. We lived through 2 world wars. We lived through the Great Depression. We lived through Jimmy Carter. We'll make it through Barack Obama. Our best days are in front of us. There's a little pessimism out there. You know, there's pessimism globally as well. And I understand that. You turn on your TV, you open up a newspaper, you listen to the radio, you get your device out, and you see Christian Coptics being led down to the beach in Libya to be murdered. You watch a Jordanian pilot burned alive. You see radical Islamists coming to Garland, Texas to kill people because of their exercise of free speech. And you can be a little pessimistic about what's going on in the world. But I will suggest to you, just as I'm optimistic about the future of this country economically, I'm optimistic about the future of the world because of American leadership that can and will, I will suggest to you, the best days of this world are ahead of the world when we elect a Republican president in 2016. That's our challenge. That's our goal. We have the opportunity to do that. But we have a challenge. We have the smallest army that we've had in this country since June of 1940. We're down to 10 carriers. The Heritage Foundation says we need 13. I tend to agree with the Heritage Foundation that 10's not enough carriers in this world that we live in. We've got one fighter, the F-35, that's in production today. But we can turn this around just like Ronald Reagan did. I'm so optimistic about the future of this country. I know this can happen. I've seen this economic recovery happen in my home state. And the power of the American worker, the ability of our people when they're free. This concept of freedom is so powerful. To free people from over-taxation, from over-regulation, from over-litigation, to free young people. Let me share with you the 2 areas that I'm really proud of the work that we did in my home state. I talked about that 4th leg of that foundation about education. There's no better way to tell a family that your child is going to succeed than for them to graduate from high school. In 2003, when I took over as the governor of the state, we were 27th in the nation in high school graduation rates. This last year, because of accountable public school policies that we put into place, Texas was number 2 in high school graduation rates. We had the highest Hispanic graduation rate in America. We had the highest African American graduation rates. Somebody said, how are you going to get the Hispanics to vote for you if you decide to run for the presidency? I said, there is no more powerful way than economic freedom and than educational freedom, and that's what we're about. We are about freeing people from overtaxation or overregulation or over litigation. Let me share with you one of the results of allowing men and women like you to keep more of what you work for. Having tax policy that obviously delivers the appropriate revenues to the state to deliver the services that your constituents are going to ask for, but not a penny more. And leave it in the private sector's hands. In the decade, well, the 14 years that I was governor, Fort Worth has a new Museum of Modern Art. Dallas has 2 performing arts facilities. The Bass has built one of the finest symphony halls in the world in Fort Worth. The Perot's just finished an extraordinary museum of natural science in Dallas. The Nashers relocated a sculpture garden from California to Dallas during that period of time. The largest geographical cultural arts district in America is now in Dallas, Texas. The little town that I used to call home till about 90 days ago, Austin, a little government and university town. It's got a new Museum of Modern Art. It's got a new performing arts facility. The world's largest film and music festival now calls it home, South by Southwest. The only Formula One race in the United States, the U.S. Grand Prix, is in Austin, Texas every fall. San Antonio has a new performing arts facility. And tonight in Houston, Texas, there are more theater seats available than any other city in America outside of New York City. That happened in a decade. And it happened not because government did one of those, but because we made decisions that we were going to leave more money in the hands of the private sector, and the private sector every time will get this right. And they contributed in an extraordinary way to the cultural arts. That's how you make a difference. You leave more of these dollars in the hands of the private sector. That's how we deal with this federal debt. Yes, you got to cut spending, but you also put policies into place where this economy will grow. What I just laid out for you in talking about what can happen in manufacturing, we can have a renaissance that will drive the revenues and pay off the debt in this country. That's what we're capable of doing. We're just a few good decisions and a leadership change at the top of that happening. That's where we are in this country. Never have I been more certain that the future of America is bright. But it's up to us. Sam, what you and your colleagues did for freedom. We have nothing less than that in front of us. The battle for the future of our country, the battle for the future of this world, literally, is going to be played out over the next 18 to 24 months as we decide what direction America is going to go in. I am so optimistic about that we're going to choose the right direction, that we're going to give our children and our grandchildren great hope. They're going to stand up and when the history books are written, and that there were a group of patriots that stood up and said, we're going to deliver this country for the next generation. You know, in the year 2000, one of the great blessings that I had as a son was to take my father back to his old air base in Great Britain, back to East Anglia, where as a 19-year-old boy, he had been stationed with the 95th Bomb Group. And I took Dad back, and we visited my old base at RAF Mildenhall. We went to London, and Mom got to go over to Wesley Chapel. My mom's a Methodist, so that's a big deal. But we visited the place where my father had some of the most extraordinary events in his life, where he fought for freedom. And I took him across the English Channel to Normandy, to Omaha Beach, for those June the 6th ceremony, Pointe du Hoc. as we're standing in that cemetery, this most incredibly powerful place with thousands of white crosses and stars of David. Interestingly, every one of those headstones face west. West across the Atlantic. West to the country that those young Americans had sacrificed everything for. West to an America they loved. West to a country they would never return home to. And it struck me that they stand there in silent judgment of us today. And the question that they ask silently is that, was their sacrifice worth it? Are we the country that they sacrificed everything for? In November of 2016, let's send the resounding answer of yes, America is still the greatest country in the world. Their sacrifices were not only respected, but the lessons were learned. Florida, I will suggest, will be ground zero for that message. Let us proclaim it from the absolute rooftops. God bless you, and thank you for letting me come.